This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. The following Care Lab podcast does not provide health or medical advice. All content is provided for information purposes only. Listeners are encouraged to speak with their healthcare provider for specific healthcare advice and are wholly responsible for the outcome of implementing any tips or information presented.
Welcome to Care Lab.
It's Care Lab Day, and I'm so excited about it. How are you?
It is Care Lab Day. It's a great day. It's always a great day when it's Care Lab Day. And I have a question to get you started.
I'm ready.
Okay. So my kids love to play Would You Rather?
Oh, Lord. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so I thought it'd be fun to start with a kid-inspired Would You Rather. And okay. I'm just going to go ahead and say, like, my kids, these are always gnarly, and I never want to choose. But here we go. Okay, are you ready for it?
I'm not ready, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay. Would you rather have 500 rusty nails driven into your back?
Oh, gosh.
Or would you rather swim in a pool full of infectious material?
Okay, I'm going to go swim in a pool of infectious material.
Okay.
Here's the reason. While I might die from whatever infectious thing happens in that pool, I might not. And if you send 500 nails in my back, I'm definitely done. And if
you
I'm
think
not
so?
Done, yeah, and if I'm not done, I'm in a lot of pain. Because at some point, I'm going to get out of this pool, right? And so then I can treat whatever illness I acquired from being in there.
That's true. But I mean, like, there's some gnarly stuff out there. I feel like you could survive 500 rusty nails. I mean, one, tetanus shot.
Okay. I'm not Jesus. Jesus had 3. So.
Well, okay. I guess we didn't define how big these nails are. I feel like.
Are they thumbtacks? No,
they're like regular size nails. They're like nails that you use to like build a house. They're not crucifixion nails.
I feel like a contractor would balk at all of this because there's no regular size nail. There's no standard. True. Is it 1 inch? Is it 3 inches? Is it 5 inches?
See, this is the problem with Would You Rathers. There's too many details that you have to know. My kids get so annoyed with me because I always refuse to choose. I'm like, those are both terrible options. I don't want either. And they're like, but you have to pick. I'm like, I really don't. I can go left, I can right, or I can turn right back around. That's what I'm choosing to do here. And then they're like,
that's the whole point of Would You Rather. That's why it's a horrible and awesome game at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. Well, clearly I'm not good at it. But neither are you, because you're also asking a bunch of clear. You just have to, I think are you allowed to ask?
I made a decision.
Okay, that's true.
You asked me about my decision, but I made a decision.
Actually, I made it bad because then I started to get into the details of it.
Yes.
Oh, that is the recurring theme.
Yes. Borderland kids, I hope that you are glad that we had this conversation. Maybe she'll be a better player next time y'all try.
Probably not. All right. Should we Care Lab something?
Let's Care Lab something.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that I get asked the most about is financial related to all of the things that come around aging, caregiving, aging in place, all that stuff. Because, this is America and everything costs something. Yeah. And so I think it would be really useful if we could chat about what our resources are in order to maximize what our insurance is covering and understand what it doesn't cover so that we can plan in advance and be able to make a plan that works, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's a good topic to talk about as well, because I think there are a lot of ways that we can often utilize, we can often utilize our benefits that we're just not aware of.
Mhm.
That can really lead to less benefit utilization later on in the form of us not needing as many like significant services or having hospitalizations. So yeah, I think this is a great topic. Where do you want to start?
Um, well, let's start with adaptive equipment and durable
Okay.
medical,
Yeah.
because clearly that's my jam. So let's start there. And that's the thing that everybody asks, like, oh well, how do I use my Medicare to pay for this? And you can't. And I'm going to tell you why you can't. So,
Can I just say, I love that we're like, let's talk about how you can get insurance to cover things. And then the very first thing
it's not
is,
covered.
well, you can't.
But listen, I don't like to bury the lead, y'all. I just want to tell you up front.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
but I'm
fair.
going to tell you why you can't, which is going to help you understand what you can get covered. Because I really feel like you should use your insurance to do the things that it will do because you've been paying into it for a long time and they are very rich. And so let's get some benefit out of it. So the definition of durable medical equipment is that not just that it's for a medical reason, that's what everybody thinks it is. It's really this equipment is necessary for somebody based on their diagnosis specifically, which means by default, it's not helpful for somebody who doesn't have a diagnosis. So let me give an example. I can breathe this regular room air, no problem. Somebody with COPD will have a hard time with that. They need oxygen. Therefore, oxygen is covered. It's durable medical equipment. You can get that at home because they really need to have it in order to live and also because of their diagnosis, whereas I don't. A grab bar, a ramp, a shower chair, I can use all of those things to be beneficial in my life to keep from falling or just to relax in the shower or whatever. At the same time, somebody with a hip replacement also needs those things. Therefore, it is not durable medical equipment and it is not covered. So because the thing that happens is some proactive people will call Medicare and say, I need some durable medical equipment. Is it covered? And they're going to say, yeah, it's covered. But what you're asking is the wrong question because
Mm-hmm.
what you're thinking about is a shower chair and they're thinking about a wheelchair. And a shower chair doesn't count as durable medical equipment, so it's not covered. But there are a few things that are. So, first of all, does my explanation make sense?
Yeah, your explanation, I think, makes total sense. But I also want to say that it's stupid. Not you and your explanation. But I mean, let's call a spade a spade. It is actually dumb to not pay for things that can prevent harm from happening up front and instead wait for something bad to happen where that person's quality of life really, really suffers, or perhaps they have a life ending event,
Mm-hmm.
and we're paying tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars for things that could have actually been prevented if we were willing to provide equipment that could be used at a preventative level. So yes, your explanation made sense. The policy, for the record, CMS, not that you're listening to me, but I think it's dumb.
But they should. But this did not happen by accident because that's why history is so important.
Mm.
This is why healthcare is broken because the way our system is set up is fee for service. We pay for a thing to be done because it's a very capitalistic mindset. I mean, it's what we do with everything else, right? If I go buy groceries, I'm paying for the groceries that I'm getting. I'm not paying in advance and then like getting a ration of them afterwards. I'm paying for what I bought. We have set healthcare up the same way. We pay for what actions get taken. And so that means we, by default, don't pay for things that don't happen. So, no, there's no mechanism to pay $100 for a shower chair or a tub transfer bench instead of $30,000 for a hip fracture because we fell trying to get out the shower
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't set the system up that way. And so I think people are recognizing that, and also our system is not sustainable in this way. And so that leads me to what you might be able to get covered now because there are some interesting things happening that are not widespread, but it's worth checking. So I talked about all the things that are not covered by insurance, and I will talk about what is covered. But in this vein, if you're on a Medicare Advantage plan, their goal is to have you not use the healthcare system. And so
As much as possible.
Much as possible. So they're trying to flip the model of our pay fee for service into a value-based plan. And so that's why some Medicare Advantage plans will proactively send you Band-Aids and blood pressure cuffs and stuff like that, or give you this magazine that you can get some over-the-counter stuff out every quarter at a certain amount. Because that's not stuff that they really actually cover. You can't like bill your insurance for it, but they're like, let us just pay a little bit on this. And if you do this, it might prevent something else from happening. So use those resources to see if you can find anything in there that is useful to you. Instead of just getting Band-Aids, which you probably can buy at CVS, maybe save up your dollars and use it to get that shower chair, or to buy a grab bar so then you can have somebody install it, or whatever. Sometimes those basic things are in there. And it's worth asking if you're on a Medicare Advantage plan. Let that not be for me to say I'm an advocate of Medicare Advantage plans. But if you're already on one, let's use the benefits that you can access from it. So there are some things that are happening, and eventually it'll change. But right now, that's kind of the only way to do it.
Because we'll be bankrupt if we don't change.
We have to.
We literally have to. Even if you actually don't give a hoot about like people and their health and their quality of life, we have to change, because financially we will be bankrupt if we don't actually change the way that we think about and deliver healthcare.
Yep, absolutely. So now there are a few things that do qualify as durable medical equipment that you can get covered, and you should. And the 5 things that come into the home are a hospital bed, oxygen, a wheelchair or a walker, a patient lift, like a Hoyer lift or a sit-to-stand lift, and in the very rare occasion, a bedside commode. That's it. That's all the things that might modify your home that get covered by insurance. And so most of the other things that do get paid for modify your body, like a catheter being placed, or wearing glasses, or those kinds of things. If you think about it in those terms, it helps you understand that how to divide and what's going to get covered. And so that's a small amount of things, but they do have a pretty high cost. And so I'm a big advocate that if you need those things, you try hard to get them from insurance. So are you surprised by how few things are covered that go into the house?
Well, no, because I'm an OT. But I think most people, will be super surprised by the very few number of things that go into the house, unless of course they've tried to get any of the stuff covered, and then they were probably told, no, can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. Oh, you can't get into your bathroom? Well, then you can have a 3-in-1, which is another name for a bedside commode, folks. But yeah, it is shocking how small that number actually is. And of course, I think that we do a pretty good job of being creative with those items as much as we can to like make them work as well as possible. But, it would still be great if we could get other things for folks as well. Hey there, it's Amelia. Listen, I am so thrilled to have a great resource like Ask Sammy as part of the Care Lab team. And here's why. It's a game changer for aging in place because it makes it so simple. All you do is ask. Just type in your question or even tell Sammy what the problem is and get tailored solutions. Everything from innovative adaptive equipment to comprehensive resources. It's a great way to become more empowered, to live more independently, and to live with greater confidence. And my favorite thing about how Ask Sammy works is it's deeply rooted in dignity and practicality. So whether you're a fellow therapist, a care partner, or someone who's seeking solutions for themselves, visit www.asksammy.com. We're going to link it in the show notes so you can find it there. Start making home more accessible today. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, I think it's also really important for clinicians to know, because I get people that ask, like clinicians that ask all the time, well, how do I get this covered by insurance for my patient? I'm like, I'm sorry, you cannot. You can get these other things, but these things that you're asking for, you cannot. And they're just like, what? They need it medically. Yes, they do. I agree with you. However, other people could use it and benefit from it too, and it's not covered. So for the 5 things, there are rules for getting it covered. And just because it is coverable does not mean that you qualify. If you understand the rules, then you can use the rules to your advantage, is how I feel about it. So let's dive into the ways to do this. So let's say your person.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm trying to make it not very technical, but it does have a few steps, and it can easily be complicated.
So get out your notepad, folks. Get out your notepad.
You need to know this. This is why it's important to know, because I think most of us as consumers of healthcare think, oh, I need a hospital bed. My doctor will write order for it. I shall receive it. And essentially that is how it works, but there are a lot of steps in between that the ball can get dropped in. And so I want you to know all the things that must happen. That way you can ask the right questions when you don't get the thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So very first thing is, you got to qualify for this device. And I'm not going to go into the details of how to do that with each one, but if you want that, I can definitely give it to you. Just reach out to me and I'll help you. So you got to qualify based on diagnosis and such. Then the doctor needs to see you in his office or at the hospital, see you face to face. A virtual visit can count. And in his notes, he or she needs to write, Mrs. Smith needs a hospital bed because of XYZ. And then they also need to write a prescription. Those two documents, their treatment notes, and the prescription needs to go to a DME provider. You only have about 5 in your area because Medicare only works with about 5 per urban area. You can find that information on Medicare.gov, but hopefully your provider already has somebody that they work with. They got to send it to them. They're going to make sure that they've got the right documentation, meaning you qualify, and they're going to send it to Medicare, and they're going to approve it, and then they're going to send it out to you. So it is theoretically simple, but you got to have all the right checkboxes. And so if the right checkboxes exist, but they didn't write it down, it's like it never happened. So now the DME company needs to go back to the doctor and say, hey, Mrs. Smith doesn't qualify for a hospital bed because of that diagnosis code. It doesn't work for that. And they got to either rewrite it or come back to you and say, I'm sorry, we can't get you a hospital bed. And so that's generally the process for all 5 of those devices. Some of them are simpler than others, like oxygen. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry what diagnosis is cover for that. Doctors know how to write that. It happens quickly. We know we need to have it. They've made a very smooth process. Whereas wheelchairs.
That gets complicated, especially if you need a power chair, folks.
Yep.
That can be a very complicated process. Yep.
And it's essentially the same process, but because you need to justify every individual part on the wheelchair, it's usually you need to have a therapist evaluation as part of this too. And then the doctor signs off on that. And so I would highly recommend that if you need a wheelchair, that you use your insurance to get it. If you need a wheelchair and a walker, please buy the walker out of pocket and use your insurance for the wheelchair, because the wheelchair costs hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on what you need. A walker costs less than $100. So there's great reason for having both, but Medicare won't pay for both. So just use it for the wheelchair.
I also think, so one of the things that people don't necessarily understand about wheelchairs too is there is a huge number of ways that wheelchairs can be customized. They don't all look like that same wheelchair that you see kind of wheeling people in and out of the hospital or in and out of skilled nursing or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Those are basically like standard wheelchairs that come in slightly different sizes essentially, but they all have the same basic parts and move in the same ways. But you can get customized wheelchairs. And I really encourage people, if it's a situation where someone is going to be wheelchair bound for the rest of their life and they have things that they want to do with their life, ask about getting a custom wheelchair, getting an evaluation for that custom wheelchair. Talk with the therapist who is treating that person or who is treating you early and often about what that process looks like to get that ball rolling early. Because if you are going to be wheelchair bound for the rest of your life or for a very prolonged period of time, having a wheelchair that fits properly, that functions well, is going to have an enormous impact on how you do everything for the rest of your life, and will have an enormous impact on your health for the rest of your life as well. So, and it can take a long time to get these custom wheelchairs one approved, and then to get them built as well. So, that is absolutely something to know about and to advocate for yourself.
I also want to define wheelchair bound, because yes, if you can't use your legs anymore, you're very wheelchair bound. You got to use it to get around. However, I would expand that definition to include if we're going to need to use a wheelchair for the rest of our lives, that we get a custom one, because there's also great reason for an 80-year-old lady with a lot of arthritis and pain and shortness of breath to have a custom wheelchair, because she needs to use it to get from point A to point B. She might be able to transfer out of it by herself and get to her bed or her other chair, but because she's short of breath and has a lot of pain with walking, she needs it to get from here to there. But that's not the typical person that you think of as being wheelchair bound. And so she needs a custom wheelchair too, because the standard wheelchairs that exist may be too wide for her. And you get a custom one, you actually get it narrower, which makes it actually easier for her to push. And she got shoulder issues, we can move the wheels forward so we don't have to bring our arms back as far to push and have an effective push. And so I like to push people to consider a custom wheelchair if there's going to be need for it for an extended period of time, whether that's for paralysis and an inability to walk at all, or if it's just for getting from point A to point B consistently. So get a custom one and not the one that's off the shelf.
Yes. And if you are wondering if a custom wheelchair is thousands of dollars, and, we're giving a custom wheelchair to a little old lady who maybe we don't know how much longer she has left to live in her life, is that financially worth it? If you're asking yourself that question, which I'm sure people who are listening to this are, then the answer is still yes, honestly. Even if we don't take into account the fact that now that lady is going to be able to participate more, she's going to be able to function better. Maybe it's the difference between being able to feed herself and needing assistance to feed herself. Like a wheelchair can really affect that finite level of functioning. But even if let's put all of that aside, is it financially worth it? Yeah, probably, because a well-fitted seating system is also going to prevent things like wounds. It's going to be more likely to prevent contractures, which is where a joint gets stuck from not moving for a prolonged period of time. It's going to, again, because let's say someone is in a more functional position to eat, it's going to help prevent things like pneumonia from aspirating on food or on drinks. And all of those are really expensive medical problems that have to be treated, like very, very expensive. So is it financially worth it? Yeah, absolutely.
And the time is worth it too. So you mentioned about how long it can take, and the average amount of time it takes to get a custom wheelchair is 3 months. However, what I would say is that's an average. And there are many companies that can help you get that faster. If you understand the process, which I just told you about, then you can move the slow part along. The 3 months is not for building it or even Medicare approval. They're mandated to get approval back within, I think, 10 or 14 days. So it's not even that. And the building of it is pretty fast. It's usually the paperwork. And somebody didn't write enough stuff. They faxed it, but the people didn't get it. And nobody's actually checking on it. So, you should be poking the bear and saying, asking the question, did you send it to the doctor's office? Yes, we did send it. Okay, call the DME. Who'd you send it to? I sent it to this company. Okay, great. I'm going to call them. Did you get it? No, we did not get it. They didn't call to tell you they didn't get it. They didn't even know they were supposed to get it. So it's just floating in the ether. So now you got to call them back and say, Dr. Whatever, please send it again. And that's the part that slows the whole thing down. Is not getting the documentation right or getting it to the right place. And so if you can push that a little bit, you can get it sooner than 3 months. And the DME provider often is able to give you a loaner, and you should ask for that. And so instead of leaving the hospital with a standard wheelchair based on height and weight, say, I would really like to have a custom wheelchair because it'll be lighter weight. I didn't even mention that, which is huge for putting it in and out the car, pushing it on carpet, all that kind of stuff. Can you connect us with somebody to do a wheelchair evaluation, even if it can't get done at the hospital, because sometimes the timing is not right for that. But they can get you started, and they can get you a loaner into the meantime while you're waiting for your chair.
I'm really glad that you said that, because the other bit of this, speaking of getting things paid for, is that Medicare is not going to buy you multiple wheelchairs right in a row,
Right?
right? They're going to buy you one wheelchair every 5 years. Is that still right? Every 5 years?
That is still right.
Yeah. So, like, once they buy you a wheelchair, even if it's one of those standard wheelchairs, they have bought you a wheelchair and they are not going to replace it for 5 years. So, this is all the more reason to make sure that that wheelchair that you are going to get is the correct wheelchair for you or for the person that you're caring for.
Now and for the future. So if we have a progressive disease process happening, we should be considering what things are going to be like 5 years from now and try to get that sooner. And that's why we write an evaluation, because we can talk about all that as clinicians. And so the other thing I want to say though too is, as a clinician though, if you find somebody or you start to work with someone who got a chair a couple of years ago, if there has been a change in status, you can get another chair. Your documentation just needs to demonstrate that significantly. So let's say somebody did get a standard height, weight wheelchair, and now you're seeing them in home health, I don't know, a year later, and that's not working for them, and you can document a decline in their functional ability. As long as you write towards that and say they already have this kind of wheelchair, it is causing XYZ problems, they've had these changes in their strength or level of ability, so now we need this, it can get covered. And I've done that multiple times. So it's all about how you paint the picture and write the documentation. But it's always better if we do the right thing first. So let's not try to have to lean into that. Let's think future aspect as we first get the first year.
I also think this kind of highlights a good point, in particularly what you said about sometimes people have progressive conditions, and what they need today either needs to be modifiable to meet what their needs are going to be tomorrow, or we need to understand how those needs are going to change. And that's one really good reason why, sometimes people can be very tempted to just go online and order a fancy wheelchair. Maybe they have the money to just pay out of pocket to go ahead and get a wheelchair, rather than jump through all the hoops of using Medicare or whatever their commercial insurance might be. But the fact is, as a layperson, it's actually really, really difficult to find that correct wheelchair, make that correct choice, understand what that future looks like. So even if that is something that's what you want to do, you want to just go ahead and buy yourself a wheelchair, you still need to work with a qualified licensed therapist who is experienced doing wheelchair evaluations and who can help guide you in that process, because otherwise you will end up wasting a lot of money on something that probably isn't going to work, as at least like best case scenario, it's probably not going to work as well as you need it to, or that person needs it to right now. And worst case scenario can actually cause significant physical harm to that person and hurt their quality of life, as well as cause different medical problems. So work with your professionals.
And the other functional reason for that too is that, because insurance pays for it for once every 5 years, that also means that wheelchair provider is your servicer for the next 5 years. If you buy something out of pocket, you're going to be on the hook for figuring out how to get that fixed if that's needed. But if you get it through insurance, then you can go back to that wheelchair provider and be like, oh, this broke, or this is not working. Can you come help me with that? The answer is yes. And now you have a service provider for it. So I really advocate for people to go through insurance to get hospital beds and wheelchairs, because you get a service provider.
So I think that this kind of segues into another topic really well, which is that how do you actually get connected with a service provider, especially let's say it's someone who maybe they haven't had a sudden healthcare event, they haven't had a sudden illness or injury, they haven't just been in the hospital, they haven't gotten out of rehab, maybe they are declining a little bit, but they're certainly not sick enough to go to the hospital or something like that. What can those people do, and how can they begin to actually access services so that they don't get to the point where they decline, to the point where they have to go to the hospital for something, or they have a significant change in their ability to function? And I mean, I think one of the things that folks think of all the time is, of course, well, you can go to your primary care doctor. And that is definitely that is an important step for entry into getting in connection with some providers. But I think it's a little bit bigger than that. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think if you haven't noticed over the episodes that we've talked about so many ways to do stuff in advance and try to prevent problems before they happen. And because we're huge advocates of that, and that's like the way to go. And so this is another opportunity to do that. And so you don't have to have an acute event and go to the hospital and get services. If you notice that you're having changes, like you were talking about, Amelia, you can enact that directly and get a therapy provider to come see you, or you go there. I would say that starting with the primary care provider is probably the best way to go about it, but you can, because you're going to need an order in order to get started with therapy. But if they're not automatically offering that to you, you can ask for it. And you can say, hey, we're having some challenges at home and we've had some close calls and some falls. Can we get some therapy? They're going to always say yes. They might not just automatically think of it, but if you ask that, they'll be like, oh, sure. And so if the person is homebound, meaning it's a very big challenge for them to get out of the house on a regular basis, then you can get home health to come to the house and provide therapy. If they're not homebound, you can go to outpatient. If they're not homebound, but you want somebody to come to the house, there are lots of mobile outpatient practices that will bill insurance for outpatient but will still come treat you at your home. So you got a lot of options that you don't have to like start at the hospital level and like do whatever they're prepping you to do one step after another. You can initiate it. CareLab listener, I have a question for you. If someone you love needed a caregiver, what qualities would you want that caregiver to have? You probably want them to be reliable, trustworthy, kind, maybe just a generally dependable and good person, right? Second question, would you also want them to be trained? I'm going to guess the answer is a definite yes. Okay, third and final question for you. Do you think it matters who gives that training? Like, is it cool if it's just in your body, or would you want that person to be qualified expert? Assuming you do, in fact, love this person who needs a caregiver, you probably want the expert, right? Well, that's what Higher Standards Caregiver Training does. Higher Standards Caregiver Training provides 100% occupational therapist-led training for caregivers. Caregivers get taught everything from gold standard foundational skills for transfers and daily living tasks, all the way up to how to deal with specific diseases and injuries. And most importantly, they are taught all of these things in a way that is practical and enhances the participation of the person who needs the care. And it actually protects the safety of everybody involved. Why? Because everyone deserves a higher standard. For a course for individuals or learning about training for care for organizations, find that information at higherstandardscaregivertraining.com.
I would agree that like the easiest point of entry is to probably go and talk to your primary care physician about the problems that you're having. But I do want to reiterate that a lot of times their go-to won't necessarily be to think of getting you started on therapy right away. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't know about it. It's just because they're really busy people. They have a lot of things going on in their head. And, sometimes for physicians, their first go-to is think about, medications or things that they themselves can directly provide the intervention for, rather than, referring to another service provider. So if you go and you have that conversation, hey, I'm having a harder time getting up from my chair. I've noticed it's harder. I'm getting really tired when I'm taking a shower in the morning. I've noticed it's harder to do XYZ. I've fallen a couple times. These are all indications that really a therapist should be involved. And so if it's not something that your doctor is bringing up, please make sure that you are actually asking for it and advocating for it. I will say also that, depending on the state where you live, there are some states where you can just call up a therapy provider directly and you can go ahead and start therapy services. And frankly, even if it's not a state where they have to have an order, you can still do that. You can call up a local occupational therapist, a local physical therapist. You can tell them your problem and they will help direct you for what you need to do in order to get them into your home or for you to get into their clinic. Trust me, they know exactly what has to be done in order to see you as a patient. You don't have to be an expert on that. They will definitely direct you, and they will help you with that process too. So that's always a good thing to know as well. Like if you don't, if you want to just go direct to the source, which I'm a big go direct to the source person in my own healthcare if I possibly can, then by all means give them a call, ask them how to do it, and they'll get you set up.
And half the time they'll do it for you. Like you tell them who their doctor is, they'll send an order over to the doctor.
Yeah.
And they'll sign it. And you don't have to have a face-to-face visit in order to get started with outpatient. You do for home health, but you don't have for outpatient services. And so they can just sign an order and you can just get started. So don't feel like you got to get to the point of which you are struggling so much that you're having a fall and going to the hospital. You can be proactive. The other thing I'd say is I think we underutilize some of the resources that our insurance does pay for.
Yeah.
And so, for example, many Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans give you a discounted or free membership to a gym through the Silver Sneakers program. And so maybe you don't need a therapist, but you just know that you need a little bit extra oomph and some work. You can go to the gym probably for free. You can call up the number on the back of your insurance card and they'll tell you what benefits you have, including things like pain management and chiropractic and acupuncture. And some of those things are starting to be included with small number of visits in your plans. I just think that people don't know about it. Mm-hmm. So another resource, even though it's kind of irritating, is to just call your insurance company directly with the number on the back of your card and say, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? And they're supposed to be able to help you navigate the system, and also the people that are in their network in order to get connected with.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd add to that, one more thing I should add to that is if you are maybe caregiving for someone who has a lot of problems and you're needing to call and ask for help from insurance frequently, you can ask for a case manager, and they are supposed to give you one. So that instead of calling the 1-800 number and getting a different person every time, you get to talk to the same person who understands what y'all are going through and can help you do the next thing. And so it's worthwhile if you feel like you're in a deep hole and you need a lot of help to get out, to ask the insurance company for a case manager.
That's a really good tip. I did not know that. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. And that is that's a game changer. I mean, just having to call your insurance company about anything over and over again and talking to a different person every time, having to tell the same story to a different person who may or may not interpret it correctly.
Yes.
Or may or may not read the notes. I mean, it's enough to make anyone want to scream and bash their head against the wall. So having a case manager, if you're dealing with a situation where someone is needing to use a lot of benefits or resources, wow, game changer. That's awesome.
Yeah, they don't really offer that up front, but it's definitely available. And they want to do that too, because of course they want you to decrease how much you're using the healthcare system. I mean, in theory, they should think that they should want you to be more healthy, but the real answer is they want you to spend less of their money. So if you talk to them in their words and say, listen, we have a lot of problems going on here and I really want to coordinate care. Is there a care manager or somebody that I can work with directly to help get some of these problems solved? They will find one for you.
What do you think it would be like to live in a world where we just got health care because it was the right thing to do and people just deserve to be healthy so that they can be functioning members of society? What would that be like?
Healthcare should be a right instead of a privilege.
It should be a right and not a privilege. And unfortunately, that's just not, it's not really the way our system is set up. But it would be a beautiful world.
It would be a beautiful world. And I hope to be an advocate to do the top-down method of changing the system, because it does need to be changed. Mm-hmm. But everybody right now who's listening to this needs services now. And so that's why I'm push you to push your insurance company to do what it promotes it's going to do, and call them and push them to do it. And because they're just taking all our money and not putting any of it back out. And so you need to make sure that you're using your benefits wisely. Not wisely, frequently. That's what I want to mean.
Yeah, using your benefits. That's what they're there for.
That's what they're there for. Not just the emergency benefit, but all of the preventative benefits that are built into your plan. The other thing I didn't add that I should is that if you are a veteran, you should be connected to the VA.
Oh my gosh.
They are. We're talking about
100%.
Medicare, yeah, and because most people are on Medicare, and you might be on Medicare and still be a veteran, but if you are a veteran, you should really get connected with your local VA. That does not mean you have to change your primary care doctor to a VA primary care. They're happy to have you keep your primary care, but you need to get in the system because there are some things that are just way better in the VA system. For example, all that stuff I said is not covered by insurance.
Covered.
The VA pays for it and they will send it to your house.
Mm-hmm.
So grab bars and shower chairs and all that stuff, they don't give you a whole lot of options about it, but they will send it to you. You got to get it installed, but they will send it to you.
Actually, the VA will do grab bar installations. Again, so obviously, if you're a veteran, you're going to know what I'm talking about here. A lot of this depends on your service connection about
Absolutely.
what exactly you can access. Some of these things you can access almost no matter what your service connection is. But if you have a certain level of service connection, you can not only have grab bars installed, you can have chairlifts installed. You can have your bathroom remodeled. You can have doorways widened. You can have all kinds. I mean, the VA will do so many like really big home modifications, honestly, for folks if there is a need and if you have that service connection there. So, and you never know until you go and you get in the system and you have an advocate and you ask the questions. But there are some really, and of course, you know, the VA has gotten a bad rap for a lot of things that, you know, probably should have gotten a bad rap for, but it is also at heart an organization that really does want to take care of folks and has extraordinary benefits that you cannot get anywhere else in this country. So if you're a veteran, go get them. You earned it.
Yes.
You earned it. Go get it.
Yeah. Including caregiving and having a caregiver come. Like there are a lot of benefits there. I will tell you that navigating the system is not easy, but we are telling you now the cheat code is you just need to know that they do it. And then you just need to keep asking. And they'll push you through to the right system or the right things. You know, there's always a protocol in order to keep going, but just know that there's options available for you. So first step is get connected if you're not connected. If you're already connected, then ask your VA provider about this stuff.
Yeah. If you are just working on getting connected with VA benefits, I really recommend, and you're not sure where to start because it can be intimidating. It is a big process and there's a big bureaucracy to get through there. I really recommend getting in touch with the local VA ombudsman. They can be very, very helpful as an advocate and to help you navigate through that process, like incredibly helpful. And every VA should have an ombudsman that you can get the contact information for and you can contact them directly. There are also a lot of almost every, I'm going to guess probably every city in America has a like veterans resource group and benefit like VA benefits group. They're not necessarily connected directly with the VA. I'm not going to like name any outright because there's so many of them. They're not necessarily, they aren't the VA, but they are groups that help to advocate for veterans to access those resources. And they're great places to go to get started and get some help as well if you're just feeling like the process is too intimidating or it's going to take too long. But first off, I mean, call your VA's ombudsman, see what they can do for you and how they can educate you, how they can advocate for you. There's the local community groups as well to kind of get your foot into the door and see what the steps are. And then, you know, once you're in, just use it. It's there for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So do you think we care labbed it?
I think we care labbed it. I think we care labbed it pretty good today.
Yeah. I'll give us the A+.
All right. Oh, excellent. We got a plus. All right. Well, if you enjoyed the episode, please make sure you're liking, subscribing. Please share this with anyone who you think might benefit from it. And we will see you next time on Care Lab.
See ya.
Bye.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.